Episode 1. The Whisper in the Chapel. You must understand, silence in a chapel is never truly silent. There are the creaks of wood, the shifting of stone, the soft tremble of candles fighting against the dark. Father Elias had lived with these sounds all his life. But that night, as the hour of prayer stretched into the depth of midnight, another sound came, one he could never explain away. It was not the wind, it was not the crack of old timber. It was a voice. At first it was faint, like breath caught between the pews, but it grew clearer with each syllable. And then Elias froze, because he heard his own name, spoken not in reverence, not in petition, but in a tone that clung like ash to the lungs. Elias! He dropped the rosary from his hands. Beads scattered across the stone floor, clicking like bones. His knees pressed against the cold altar step, but he dared not move. His training told him to pray louder, to drown the intruder with holy words, but his heart betrayed him. He wanted to listen. The chapel air thickened, candles guttered. The wooden crucifix above him seemed heavier, its carved Christ bowing lower, almost in pity. Again the voice, closer now, whispering yet thunderous within his chest. Elias! It did not ask, it did not plead, it called. And for the first time in decades, the priest who had spoken the names of saints, martyrs, and the Holy Trinity each dawn and dusk, realized with a chill that he was hearing his name not from heaven, but from somewhere far beneath it. He forced himself to stand, gripping the edge of the altar until his knuckles whitened. "Who speaks?" he demanded, his voice breaking against the vastness of the empty chapel. No answer, only the echo of his own trembling words. Then, like pages turning in an unseen book, the sound shifted. It became a prayer he had never taught, never read, never dared imagine. The cadence was unmistakable, sacred, ancient, but the words dripped like venom, each line soaked in blasphemy, and threaded through every stanza was his name. Not Father Elias, not Reverend, only Elias, as if heaven had disowned his title. He stumbled back, his cassock catching on the kneeling rail. Fear crawled up his spine, not because the chapel felt haunted, but because the prayer felt familiar. Somewhere deep within, in a part of his soul he had buried long ago, he recognized it. The prayer ended with a hiss, as though the earth itself exhaled. Silence reclaimed the chapel, but it was no longer holy silence. Elias pressed a hand to his chest. His heart hammered not with faith, but with dread. Because he now understood something that no seminary had ever dared teach. Hell prays too, and tonight, hell had prayed for him. Episode 2. The Confession That Burned. The next evening, Father Elias forced himself to believe it had been nothing more than exhaustion. A priest who spends his nights among shadows will inevitably hear whispers where there are none. He told himself this, again and again, until the words felt almost like faith. But faith shattered when the parish door creaked open. A man stepped in, thin, hollow-eyed, with clothes that hung like rags. He smelled of ash and damp earth. Without greeting, without even crossing himself, he walked straight to the confessional booth. Elias felt unease coil in his stomach, yet duty demanded he follow. He slid into his side of the booth, pulling the lattice shut. The darkness between them was familiar, safe. At least, it had always been. The man's breath rattled, then came the words, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." The formula was correct, but the voice, oh the voice, felt wrong. Each syllable struck like flint against Elias's chest, sparking an old fear from the night before. "What sins do you confess, my son?" Elias asked, his voice steadier than his heart. A pause, then in a whisper that carried heat like fire, "I have watched you. I have known you. I have carried your secrets as though they were mine." Elias stiffened. "My secrets?" The man laughed softly, a laugh with no joy. "Yes, the night you doubted the creed. The moment you cursed the silence of God when your mother died. The prayer you abandoned halfway, because you feared he had abandoned you first. Shall I go on?" Blood drained from Elias's face. These were not sins confessed to him. These were his sins, private shadows buried in the marrow of his memory. "You are mistaken," Elias said quickly. His hand tightened on the wooden bench. "These are not yours to speak." But the man continued, relentless, as though reading from a scroll written in fire. "And last night, when you heard your name, do you not recall the way your soul leaned forward? You listened, Elias. You wanted to hear more. The air inside the booth grew unbearable, suffocating, as though flames licked unseen through the lattice. Elias reached for the crucifix that hung at his side, but even the wood felt hot to the touch, as if it too rejected his grasp. "Who are you?" he whispered. The man pressed his lips against the screen. Elias could almost feel the heat of his breath searing through. "I am only a voice, a mouth for the prayer that continues below, but soon you will not need me to hear it. Soon you will know it as your own." Then came silence. Elias flung open the booth, but the other side was empty. The door had not opened. No footsteps marked the stone floor. Only the smell of smoke lingered, curling around the crucifix, making it tremble in his grasp. And Elias understood. The prayer had followed him. It was no longer in the chapel. It was inside the walls, inside the people, inside him. Episode 3. Blood on the Psalms. By dawn, Father Elias's hands still shook. He had scrubbed the confessional until his knuckles bled, desperate to erase the scent of smoke. Yet no matter how hard he worked, the booth still reeked of ash, as if hell itself had breathed there. When the bells tolled morning mass, he told himself routine would shield him. Ritual was stronger than fear, or so he hoped. He opened his psalter, the old book of Psalms he had used for decades. Its leather was worn, its margins scribbled with prayers of a younger, more faithful man. But this morning, the pages were not as he remembered them. On Psalm 88, Domine, Deus salutis mei, in die clamavi, et nocte coram te, a dark stain bled through the parchment. At first Elias thought it was ink spilled from his own weary hand. But as the stain spread, dripping into the Latin verses, the smell struck him, copper, raw, unmistakable. Blood. His breath caught. He touched it with his fingertip, and the warmth nearly made him retch. It was not dry. It was fresh. The crimson line traced the words about the soul that descends into the pit. And then, before his eyes, the letters themselves shifted. What once read clamavi, I cried out, warped and twisted into something else. Elias blinked, rubbed his eyes, but the change did not fade. Now the verse spelled a single word. Elias. The book fell from his hands, thudding against the stone floor. When he bent to retrieve it, the stain had multiplied. Dozens of psalms now bore the same corruption, the same rewriting. The words no longer praised God, they beckoned the abyss. And every passage, every line where a sinner once cried for deliverance, now carried his name instead. Save Elias from the pit. Deliver Elias from the torment. Elias shall descend forever. His vision blurred. His ears rang as though the chapel were filled with invisible choirs chanting his damnation. He stumbled backward, colliding with the altar. The crucifix above him shook against the wall, and for a single terrifying moment, he swore the carved Christ turned its face away. "No," Elias gasped, clutching his chest. "This is a trick, a temptation. I am still yours. I am still yours." But his words dissolved into the silence. Silence that was no longer holy, but heavy, watching him, weighing him. Suddenly, a droplet fell onto his sleeve, red, warm. He looked up and his throat closed. From the rafters above, blood seeped through the wood, falling drop by drop onto the open psalter. The chapel became a bleeding mouth. The book of Psalms lay drowning in crimson, and though Elias tried to shut it, to force the covers closed, the pages fluttered on their own, turning, until they stopped at a verse he had never seen before. It was not written in ink, it was carved into the page with fire. Elias shall answer when hell prays. His knees buckled, his voice cracked, and for the first time in his priesthood, Elias could not pray. Episode 4. The Child Who Spoke in Latin. The village children often played outside the chapel, their laughter rising like a fragile hymn against the stone walls. Father Elias had always found comfort in that sound. Innocence, he believed, was the last true echo of heaven. But that morning, the laughter stopped. He stepped outside to see them gathered near the courtyard well, silent and wide-eyed, their faces pale as though winter itself had touched them. At the center stood a little boy, Matteo, no older than 8. Elias knew him well. The boy was bright, mischievous, and had never learned his letters. Yet now he stood stiff and trembling, eyes rolled back until only the whites showed, and from his lips poured words that should never have belonged to him. Domine, exaudi orationem inferni. Lord, hear the prayer of hell. The children backed away, whispering Mateo's name, but he did not hear them. His small hands twisted upward, fingers curled like claws in supplication. His voice deepened, layered, as though 100 tongues spoke through one fragile throat. And woven into that unholy chant was the same name Elias had come to dread. His own. Elias, Elias, Elias. The boy's voice cracked, yet the chant continued, relentless. With every repetition, Elias felt the courtyard close in around him, air tightening like a rope. Stop! Elias shouted, rushing forward. He seized Mateo's shoulders, shaking him gently. Child, wake up! This is not your tongue, not your prayer. But Mateo's eyes fixed on nothing. His lips quivered faster, spilling syllables Elias recognized from ancient rites, snatches of forbidden Latin, prayers no priest was ever meant to speak. And then, without warning, the boy screamed. A single piercing cry split the air, and he collapsed against Elias's chest, limp, as though his strength had been drained in an instant. The courtyard filled with the wails of frightened children. Mothers ran forward, gathering them, their eyes darting between the priest and the boy in horror. Elias lowered Mateo gently to the ground. The child's breathing was shallow but steady. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, and in that moment, in a voice no louder than a sigh, Mateo whispered in perfect, flawless Latin, "They are calling you. Father, do you not hear them?" Then he fainted. The words clung to Elias like chains. He pressed his trembling fingers to his lips, realizing too late what had just happened. This was no random possession, it was a message. When the villagers asked what had occurred, Elias lied. He said it was fever, nothing more. But when they carried the boy away, he noticed something the others did not. A line of blood beneath Mateo's fingernails, as though he had been clawing at stone from within. That night Elias tried to sleep, but Mateo's voice returned again and again, echoing in the dark. "They are calling you, Father." And Elias, with horror dawning in his chest, realized it was true. The children had only heard one voice that morning, but he had heard many, all of them chanting his name. Episode 5, The Mirror That Refused His Face. The confessional was no longer a refuge. The Psalms had betrayed him, and even the children carried whispers not their own. Father Elias began to dread the smallest rituals of his priesthood, for each one seemed to unravel into a doorway that should never be opened. That night he sat alone in the sacristy, preparing for Vespers. A single candle burned beside him, its flame bending as if listening. On the table lay a polished brass mirror, used by generations of priests to adjust their vestments before stepping into the sanctuary. Elias had never noticed it much before, but now, as the candle trembled, his eyes were drawn to its surface. At first he saw nothing unusual, only the tired lines of his own face, the shadows beneath his eyes. He leaned closer, whispering a prayer to steady his heart. But as he spoke, something inside the glass shifted. The reflection lagged. His lips moved, but the figure in the mirror was slower, a fraction behind, as though mocking his prayer. Elias blinked, stepped back, then leaned forward again, and this time the reflection did not follow at all. The mirror refused him. Instead of his face, he saw another version of himself. Skin sallow, cracked like dry earth, eyes hollowed, black as ink, cassock torn and smoldering, as if it had been dragged through fire. This figure knelt, head bowed, muttering in a voice that slithered through the glass. Elias strained to listen. The words were Latin but warped, guttural, dripping with heat. It was the same infernal prayer he had heard in the chapel, on the lips of the boy, in the booth of ash. And again his name rang through it like a funeral bell. Elias, Elias. His stomach turned. He slammed the mirror face down on the table, heart pounding, but the sound did not stop. The words now seeped from beneath the brass, vibrating through the wood as though the mirror itself had become a mouth. "No," he whispered, gripping the crucifix around his neck. "I am yours, not theirs." With shaking hands he lifted the mirror once more, desperate to reclaim his reflection. But what stared back was worse than before. This time, the mirrored Elias lifted its head. Blackened lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. And then, in perfect clarity, it spoke, not as an echo but as the original. "You are already praying with us." The candle blew out. Darkness swallowed the sacristy. The mirror slipped from his hands, shattering across the floor. Yet even in shards, every fragment gleamed with the same image. A dozen ruined faces of Elias, each one chanting his name. His knees buckled. He fell among the broken glass, staring at his own multiplied damnation, and he understood, with a clarity more painful than fire. If heaven had abandoned his reflection, then perhaps heaven had abandoned him too. Episode 6, The Night of 333. The first time it happened, Father Elias thought it a mistake of the bells. Perhaps the ropes had loosened or the wind had teased them into sound. But the second time, and the third, he knew. At precisely 3:33 a.m., the chapel bell tolled. 3 notes, low and heavy, like iron groaning beneath the earth. Each strike echoed too long, stretching across the village as though the air itself bent under its weight. No one was there to ring it. No one could have been. Elias rose from his bed, heart clawing at his ribs. He lit a lantern and moved through the rectory, each step reluctant. The air smelled wrong, like wax and burnt feathers. When he opened the chapel door, the lantern nearly slipped from his hand. They were waiting. Dozens of figures knelt in the pews, silent, motionless, shadows, but with form enough to bend the light. Their heads were bowed, hands folded as if in worship. Elias could not see their faces, only the pale suggestion of features drowned in darkness. And all of them were whispering. It wasn't prayer as he knew it. It was lower, heavier, a murmur that pulsed like blood through veins. The words were indecipherable, tangled in guttural tones, but one word rose above the rest, again and again, relentless. Elias, his name woven into the cadence of the damned. The bell tolled again. This time it seemed to shake the floor beneath him. The crucifix above the altar swayed, as if trying to flee its place. The shadows stirred. Slowly, every head turned, not toward the altar, not toward heaven, but toward him. Dozens of eyeless gazes fixed upon his trembling figure. "Why?" Elias croaked, his voice breaking against the weight of silence. "Why my name?" The whispering stopped. For a heartbeat, the chapel was utterly still. Then, in a voice that did not belong to any single figure but to all of them together, the shadows spoke. "Because you listen." Elias staggered back, pressing against the heavy wooden doors. His crucifix burned hot against his skin, as if scorched from within. The bell struck a third time, 3:33. The sound split the night open. The shadows rose as one, their forms stretching unnaturally, filling the pews like smoke. Elias stumbled forward, desperate to reach the altar, desperate to cling to some remnant of light. But with every step, the figures closed in, their whispers thickening, their hands reaching. The lantern in his grip flickered and died. He was swallowed by their presence, their countless mouths breathing his name into his ears, into his lungs, into his very bones. And then, just as suddenly, the bell stopped. The shadows collapsed like ash on the wind. The pews were empty, the chapel silent once more. But Father Elias knew nothing had truly ended. He fell to his knees before the altar, shaking, drenched in cold sweat. Because tonight, hell had not only prayed for him, tonight hell had answered. Episode 7, The Angel That Turned Away. Desperation drove Father Elias to call upon heaven. If hell had learned to whisper his name, then surely heaven could still silence it. Surely. He fasted. He prayed until his lips cracked. He burned incense until the chapel reeked of smoke and sorrow. And at last, on the 7th night after the bell's tolling, he prepared the ritual of deliverance, a prayer of exorcism meant not for a person, but for himself. He stood before the altar, cassock clinging with sweat, crucifix raised high. His voice shook as he invoked the archangels, one by one, his words echoing against the vaulted stone. "Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, defend me against the snares of the wicked." At first, nothing stirred. Then the air shifted. A sound like wings, vast and trembling, filled the chapel. Light seeped through the windows, though no moon shone outside, and Elias felt his knees buckle. He knew heaven had heard him. A figure descended, its presence so fierce the very shadows fled to the corners. Elias dared not look fully upon it, but he felt the weight of its gaze, sharp as judgment. His heart soared. His prayer had not been in vain. But then the figure paused. It did not step forward. It did not lift him from despair. Slowly, almost sorrowfully, it turned its head away. Elias's throat closed. "No, please do not leave me." The angel did not answer. Instead, a whisper, low and trembling, threaded through the silence. Not from the heavens, but from the cracks of the floor beneath him. He is not yours anymore. Elias clutched the crucifix tighter, raising it high. I belong to him. I am his servant. The angel's wings shifted, feathers glowing faintly. For a heartbeat, Elias thought it would reach out, but instead, it stepped back, its radiant form blurring at the edges as if unwilling to remain. And then came words, spoken not with malice but with unbearable grief. Your name is no longer written here. The chapel shuddered. Elias dropped to his knees, his body trembling with cold. No, no. You lie! My name is carved in the book of life. I am his priest. But the angel did not lift him. It turned, retreating into the light, its face veiled in sorrow. And as it vanished, the whispers surged, triumphant, curling like smoke around Elias's ears. Elias, Elias! The crucifix slipped from his hands, clattering against the stone. For the first time in his priesthood, Elias realized the truth no prayer could bury. If heaven itself turned away, then only hell remained to claim him. He lay prostrate on the floor, tears burning his face, his voice a broken echo in the emptiness. Why my name? The silence that followed was not heaven's silence, it was the silence of a waiting grave. Episode 8, the gospel that rewrote itself. Father Elias had always trusted the written word. When every voice around him trembled with lies, Scripture remained steadfast, unchanging, eternal, incorruptible. But on the night after the angel turned away, even the word betrayed him. The chapel was empty, its silence sharp as glass. Elias sat at his desk with the gospel spread open before him. The candles burned low, their flames bending inward as if the book itself consumed their light. He traced the first verse of Matthew with a shaking finger, whispering it aloud to steady himself. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ. His voice faltered. The ink beneath his finger blurred, letters softening into liquid darkness. When they hardened again, the words were different. The book of the generation of Elias. The priest recoiled. He rubbed his eyes, blinked, turned the page. But everywhere he looked, the ink shifted and bled. Verses rewritten, names replaced. Where once it read Judas, it now bore Elias. Where once the Psalms sang to God, now they pleaded for Elias. Where once the prophets cried of Israel, now they warned of Elias. It was not a translation error. It was not exhaustion. It was deliberate. The gospel had chosen him, carved him into its flesh, twisting holy truth into blasphemy. His breath caught in his throat. He slammed the book shut, but it trembled in his hands, shuddering like a living thing. Heat bled through the cover. The leather cracked, as if veins pulsed beneath it. Desperate, he threw it onto the altar. But instead of closing, the book flung itself open. Pages whipped in a violent storm until they stilled on a passage Elias had never seen before. The letters burned red, glowing like coals, and hell prayed, and the heavens were silent. And Elias answered, "No!" His voice cracked, raw with terror. "This is not the word of God. This is corruption. This is—" Before he could finish, the letters writhed again, rearranging into something even worse. The words spelled a prayer he had heard whispered in every corner of his torment. Domine, exaudi orationem inferni. Lord, hear the prayer of hell. And again his name threaded through it. Elias fell to his knees, clutching his ears, as if he could shut out the sound of ink scratching itself across parchment. But he could not escape. The book spoke without voice, the pages vibrating against the altar as though chanting. Elias, Elias, Elias. He staggered back, his vision narrowing. The candlelight flared, then extinguished all at once. The chapel plunged into darkness, yet the gospel glowed faintly, like embers in the void. And as Elias stared, trembling, he realized the most horrifying truth of all. The word of God was not gone. It had been rewritten. And now every verse ended with his damnation. He dared not touch the book again. But even with his eyes closed, even with his hands pressed hard against his ears, he could still hear it, pages turning, lines shifting, ink etching his name into eternity. The gospel had made its choice, and it was not God's. Episode 9, the grave that answered back. The churchyard had always been quiet, a field of stone and memory, where the dead rested beneath their crosses. Father Elias often walked there at dawn, reciting prayers for souls long forgotten. But on this night he wandered among the graves not for devotion, but for proof. proof that something holy still lingered in the soil. Lantern in hand, he stopped at a weathered headstone whose name had long been worn away by rain. An unmarked grave. Elias knelt, pressing his hand to the damp earth. His voice, cracked but steady, rose into the night. Requiem aeternam dona eis, Domin, eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord. At first, only silence. Then a low tremor rippled through the ground. Elias froze, his breath clouding in the cold air. The soil shifted, and from beneath it a voice emerged. Elias? He staggered back, nearly dropping the lantern. The voice was muffled, strained, as though rising through layers of dirt, but unmistakably human. Swallowing his terror, he pressed the crucifix to his chest and whispered, "Who speaks?" The earth groaned, and the voice answered, not with a name, but with his own. "Elias, Elias, why do you pray for me?" "When the prayer is for you." The lantern flickered wildly. Shadows stretched long across the gravestones, writhing like restless souls. Elias's knees weakened, but he forced himself closer to the grave. "In the name of Christ, I command you, tell me who you are." The reply came with a sound like nails scratching wood. "I am no one. I am everyone. I am what waits for you beneath the soil. Every prayer you whisper, every psalm you cling to, they are not for us. They are for you." Elias's hand trembled. "I am a servant of God. My prayers are heard in heaven." The ground split. A crack tore through the earth, no wider than a finger, but deep, bleeding darkness. From it seeped the stench of rot and fire, and the voice grew louder, closer, as though the grave itself breathed. "Heaven does not answer your prayers, we do." The soil bulged, rising like something beneath struggled to break free. Elias stumbled backward, the lantern swinging, casting crazed light over the crooked crosses, and then the grave laughed. A hollow, mirthless sound that rolled through the cemetery, rattling stone and bone alike. It was not the laugh of one voice, it was the laugh of many, layered and overlapping, echoing from grave to grave until the entire yard joined in. Dozens of headstones seemed to shudder, as though the dead beneath had awakened to mock him. "Elias, Elias," they chanted. He fled. He ran through the gates, heart hammering, not daring to look back. But even as the cemetery shrank behind him, the sound clung to the night air, following him like a curse. By the time he collapsed against the chapel doors, gasping, he knew the truth that clawed at his soul. The dead did not rest. The dead prayed too. And they prayed for him. Episode 10, The Sermon of Shadows. The church was filled that Sunday morning, or so it seemed. Faces lined the pews, bowed heads ready for the word. Father Elias clung to the pulpit like a drowning man, clutching his sermon notes, though he could no longer remember the words he had written. He told himself this moment would restore him. If he could preach, if he could speak God's word aloud without fear, perhaps the nightmare would break. He cleared his throat. "Beloved, today we gather to remember that light shines in the darkness." His voice faltered. The silence in the chapel was unnatural. Not the gentle hush of prayer, but a suffocating stillness, as though every breath had been swallowed. He looked up from his notes. The congregation stared back at him, dozens of eyes fixed on his face, unblinking, unbreathing, not a cough, not a rustle, only stillness. Elias forced himself onward, and the darkness has not overcome it. Then, in a single instant, every candle in the church extinguished. The chapel plunged into black. His pulse thundered in his ears. He called out, "Stay calm, my children. Remain where you are." But no answer came. No one moved. He struck a match with shaking fingers. Its weak glow revealed something that made his stomach clench. The pews were empty. Every parishioner, gone, vanished as though they had never been there. Yet the silence did not remain. From the darkness came a murmur, low and steady, swelling like a tide. Words in Latin, broken and guttural, whispered in 100 voices. The sound rose from the very pews themselves, as if shadows had taken the place of his flock. Oratio Inferni, the prayer of hell. And threaded through it, again, always again, was his name. "Elias, Elias, Elias." The match slipped from his fingers, dying before it hit the floor. Panic clawed at his chest. He stumbled from the pulpit, groping through the black toward the altar. He pressed his hands against the stone, whispering the only prayer he still remembered by heart. "Deliver us from evil. Deliver us from evil." The shadows laughed. It was not the laugh of his parishioners. It was hollow, ancient, a choir of the damned echoing from every corner of the chapel. The sound grew louder, sharper, until Elias could feel it in his bones. Then, without warning, the voices stopped, and one voice, one singular, terrible voice, spoke directly into his ear. "You are no shepherd. You are the sermon." Something cold brushed his cheek. He spun around, but there was nothing, only the dark. The candles flared back to life all at once. The church was full again. Men, women, children, all sitting quietly as though nothing had changed. Their faces serene, their eyes lowered. Elias stood trembling before them, sweat dripping down his temples, crucifix burning in his palm. But he knew what he had seen. The congregation was still there, but so were the shadows. And only one of them had truly listened to his sermon. Episode 11, The Cross That Trembled. Father Elias had clung to the crucifix all his life. In the carved wood he had seen proof that suffering could be redeemed, that death was never the last word. Yet now, even the cross began to betray him. It began one night as he knelt before the altar, rosary tangled in his fingers. His voice was hoarse from hours of prayer, but still he forced the words. "In the name of Christ, deliver me." The great wooden crucifix that hung above the altar shuddered. At first it was subtle, a faint tremor, as though stirred by a draught. Elias paused, watching the candlelight ripple across the carved face of Christ. The chapel air was still, yet the cross continued to quake. He swallowed hard and pressed on. "Lord, I am your servant, do not forsake me." The crucifix jolted violently, chains clanking against the stone wall. The Christ figure seemed almost alive, straining as if in agony, arms pulling against the nails that bound them. Elias stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. Then silence. The cross hung still once more. His knees shook as he stepped forward. Is this a sign?" he whispered. He spoke again, this time not to God, but to test. "Deliver us from evil." The cross convulsed, shaking so fiercely the candles guttered out. Splinters fell from the wood, scattering across the altar like broken teeth. But when Elias fell silent, the cross grew still, perfectly still. His hands trembled. A horrifying realization crawled through him. The crucifix only trembled when he prayed. He tried again, whispering the words of consecration. The cross jerked violently, rattling against its iron chain. He stopped mid-sentence, and it froze. It was not reacting to faith, it was rebelling against it. With dread pressing on his chest, Elias lifted his crucifix pendant, clutching it so tightly the edges cut into his palm. He dared to speak one last prayer, his voice breaking. "Lord, if you hear me, if you claim me still." The great crucifix tore itself from the wall. It crashed to the floor, splintering the marble tiles. The Christ figure twisted in the wreckage, eyes carved in wood seeming to stare not at heaven but at him. Elias fell to his knees, unable to breathe. The rosary slipped from his grasp, and then, through the ringing silence, he heard it again, the whisper that had haunted his every prayer. "Elias." But this time, it did not come from beneath the earth. It came from the shattered crucifix at his feet. The carved lips parted. The voice slithered through the broken wood. "Do not pray, we have already heard you." Elias staggered back, hands pressed to his ears, but the words followed him, curling through the air like smoke. The cross no longer trembled, it had spoken, and its voice was not heaven's. Episode 12, The Last Confession. The confessional had become a place of dread, but Father Elias still opened its door. He told himself it was duty. Perhaps he only wished to prove that one part of his priesthood remained untouched. That night, as the storm clawed at the windows, the booth creaked open. A figure entered, the shape of a man, tall and gaunt, his steps slow as if burdened by centuries. The curtain drew shut, and darkness thickened between them. Elias forced his voice steady. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Speak, my child. What sins weigh upon you?" For a moment, silence. Then the answer came. "My sin," the voice rasped, "is being you." Elias froze. "Explain yourself." The man chuckled low, a sound like wood splintering. "You ask for confession, but you already know it. Every doubt, every betrayal, every unspoken desire, you carried them first. I only carry what you left behind." "No," Elias whispered. His hands tightened on the wooden bench. "This is deception. Who are you?" The voice leaned closer, pressing against the lattice. "I am Elias." A chill devoured his chest. "Blasphemy. Is it?" the voice asked. I remember your mother's death, the curse you hissed into the floor of your empty room. I remember the sermon you delivered with lips that preached but a heart that doubted. I remember the silence that comforted you more than God ever did. Tell me, Father, do those memories not belong to you? Elias shook his head violently. You are a liar, a phantom. The figure laughed again, but this time it was his own laughter, his voice, his cadence, his very breath. It was as though he were speaking to a mirror made of shadow. I am what waits for you, Elias. The self you abandoned, the name written not in heaven but in the pit. When hell prays, it is not for the priest, it is for the man beneath the cassock, and that man is me. Elias's mouth went dry. His crucifix felt heavier than iron. If you are me, then what do you want? The voice softened, almost tender. To take my place. Suddenly, the air in the booth scorched. The wood creaked as if bending under unseen fire. Elias tore open the lattice, desperate to confront his confessor face to face. But the booth was empty. Only the faint outline of a figure lingered in the air, glowing red like coal. His own outline, his own posture, his own face, blurred but unmistakable. It leaned forward and whispered once more, "You will confess, Elias, not to God, but to me. And when you do, the prayer will be complete." The figure dissolved into ash. The booth fell silent. Elias staggered out, knees shaking, lungs starved for air. For the first time, he realized confession was no longer for sinners seeking forgiveness. It was a ritual for himself, and the one waiting for his last confession was Elias. Episode 13, The Prayer That Opened the Floor. The chapel had grown hostile. Candles refused to burn steady, crucifixes twisted on their nails, and every page of scripture bled his name. Father Elias knew he had only one weapon left, prayer itself. If his soul was truly slipping into hell's litany, then he would drown the infernal chorus with his own voice, even if it killed him. So at midnight he stood before the altar and began. Pater noster quies in caelis. At once, the stone beneath him groaned. The words rattled through the floor as if the earth itself resisted. Still, Elias pressed on. Louder, his voice clawing at the heavens. Hallowed be thy name. The ground cracked. Hairline fractures split across the marble, snaking outward from his knees. He felt them shudder beneath his weight, dust rising in pale clouds. Deliver us from evil, he cried. The floor answered. A violent tremor shook the chapel. Tiles shattered, splitting open like jaws. From the cracks surged a heat that smelled of iron and rot, burning his throat. Elias stumbled but did not stop. His voice rose above the chaos, desperate, defiant. Save me, O Lord. The earth split wide. With a thunderous roar, the marble floor collapsed, opening into a chasm of flame and shadow. Pews tumbled into the abyss, wood shrieking as they vanished. The altar itself tilted, its chalice sliding, spilling blood-red wine into the fire below. Elias clung to the edge, heart hammering, his prayer now a scream. Do not forsake me. From the depths, voices surged up like smoke. Not one, not dozens, hundreds, thousands chanting in a single monstrous harmony. It was the prayer he had heard whispered in the dark, now magnified until the chapel shook with it. Elias, Elias, Elias. The heat scorched his skin, blistering his palms as he clung to the edge. He looked down and saw not fire alone, but faces, endless faces, writhing, twisted in agony, yet chanting his name with devotion that mocked every saint's hymn. Why me? Elias sobbed. Why my name? The abyss answered, not with words but with an image. Out of the fire rose a figure, his own figure. A second Elias, blackened, eyes like coals, arms outstretched as though welcoming him home. The twin's mouth moved, and though no sound came, Elias knew the words. Because you already pray with us. The marble edge crumbled beneath his fingers. He slipped, legs dangling over the pit, voices screaming his name like a psalm inverted. With all his strength he flung himself back, rolling across the broken stone. The chasm swallowed another pew and then stilled, as if sated. The floor sealed shut. Only dust and silence remained. Elias lay trembling on the cold marble, his cassock scorched, his breath ragged. He realized with horror that his prayer had not reached heaven. It had opened the ground beneath him, and hell had listened. Episode 14, The Trial of Heaven and Hell. When Father Elias awoke, he was not in the chapel. He lay on a ground that was not stone, not earth, but something shifting, like ash floating on water. The air was thick with a glow that was neither day nor night. Above him stretched a sky torn in two, one half burning white with blinding light, the other black and writhing with fire. And at the center, Elias stood. He staggered to his feet, clutching his chest, crucifix hanging like lead around his neck. "Where am I?" he whispered. The answer came as a chorus. On his left, wings unfurled, a host of angels, radiant, their faces veiled by light too fierce to behold. On his right, shadows coiled upward, their forms shifting, grinning, mouths filled with smoke and teeth. Between them, Elias felt smaller than dust. "This is not death," one angelic voice declared, clear as a bell. "This is judgment." The demons laughed, their voices like claws on iron. "No, not judgment, a trial. His name belongs to us." Elias's throat tightened. "No, I am a priest. I am his servant." "Servant?" one of the angels interrupted. The light around it dimmed enough for Elias to see a face. Sorrowful, stern. "Your prayers faltered. Your faith cracked. You doubted him. You listened when hell called your name." The shadows surged closer, hissing in triumph. "Yes, he listened. He opened. He belongs to the pit. His reflection prays with us. His gospel sings with us. The cross itself spoke our claim." Elias clutched his crucifix. "But I never renounced him. I never gave myself to you." The angels fell silent, the demons stilled. Then one angel spoke again, softer this time. "Your name is not where it once was. It does not shine in the book of life." The demons howled with laughter, circling him like vultures. "Hear it! Heaven does not claim you. Your name burns in our prayer alone." "No!" Elias cried, collapsing to his knees. "Then why do you call me? Why my name?" The host of angels and the horde of demons answered at once, voices colliding in thunder and flame. "Because you are the bridge." The sky split further, light and shadow tearing at the horizon. The ground beneath Elias trembled, ash swirling like a storm. The angels raised their voices in lament, the demons in hunger. "You will decide," the angels intoned. "You will surrender," the demons hissed. Elias lifted his head, tears burning down his face. He saw the abyss waiting in the darkness, the fire gnashing below. He saw the endless light of heaven, distant, dim, yet still reaching. And he understood, his name was not merely a claim, it was a key. Both sides needed him, both sides had prayed for him, and both would not let go. Elias screamed as the world ripped apart, the trial of his soul becoming the battlefield of eternity. Episode 15, the name carved in fire. The world split around him, half burning with divine light, half writhing with shadow and flame. Father Elias stood at the center, trembling, every breath a battle. The angels sang his name in sorrow, the demons chanted it in triumph. Both sides clawed for him, as though his soul were the hinge upon which eternity itself swung. "Choose!" the demons howled, their laughter ringing like iron chains. "Decide!" the angels cried, voices heavy with grief. Elias clutched the crucifix at his chest, its edges biting into his palm. He felt his name written upon him, burned into his flesh, carved into his very marrow. He saw it now, written in the flames below, scratched in the ash above, etched even across the blinding light of heaven. His name had become a prayer not his own. "Why me?" he shouted, his voice breaking. "Why must both heaven and hell pray for me?" The answer came from everywhere, and from no place at all. "Because you are the prayer." The ground beneath him split once more, fire bleeding through the cracks. Out of the abyss rose his other self, the blackened Elias, reflection and twin, the one he had seen in mirrors and shadows. Its eyes burned, its lips curled into a knowing smile. "You are not chosen to be saved," the shadow said. "You are chosen to open. Through you, the final amen will be spoken. Through you, the gate will fall." The angels raised their swords, but none struck. Their faces wept light. "Elias, if you kneel to them, the world burns. If you kneel to us, the world suffers, but if you kneel to neither." The sentence was left unfinished. Elias felt his knees buckle. Fire licked at his cassock, light seared his eyes. He thought of the Psalms rewritten in blood, of the cross that trembled, of the child who spoke in tongues he never taught. He thought of the cemetery graves laughing his name, of the gospel that had made him its subject. There was no salvation left, only a choice of ruin. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Then let the prayer end with me." He lifted the crucifix, pressing it against his own chest. Heat surged through him, fire and light colliding in his veins. His name burned hotter, searing through flesh, etching itself outward, across his cassock, across his arms, across his face. The letters of his name carved themselves in fire. Elias. The angels recoiled. The demons screamed. The very air split apart as the name shone like a brand, brighter than flame, darker than shadow. Elias fell to the ground, his body convulsing as the fire consumed him from within. His scream became a prayer, a final cry that silenced both choirs of light and abyss. And then silence. When the smoke cleared, the center stood empty. No priest, no body, only stone scorched with a single word, burned deeper than time could erase. Elias. No one knew whether he had saved the world or doomed it. But from that night onward, every prayer, whether whispered to heaven or muttered in hell,
Epilogue, the name that would not die. They say the chapel stands empty now. Its doors are barred, its bell rusted silent. Villagers whisper that those who wander too close at night hear a name carried on the wind, echoing through the stones like a breath that never ends. Elias. The altar where the priest once prayed lies scorched, its marble split by cracks that glow faintly when the moon wanes. No one dares touch the gospel he left behind. The pages shift on their own, as if written by invisible hands. And though the ink fades with each season, one word remains, carved deeper and deeper into the paper until it bleeds through every page. Elias. Some claim they have seen him still, a shadow kneeling in the pews, lips moving in a prayer no one dares repeat. Others swear that when the bell strikes 3:33, though no rope pulls it, an unseen congregation answers, chanting the same name in a chorus that curdles the blood. The church denies it all. They say Father Elias abandoned his post, fled into madness. His name is struck from records, his sermons erased, yet in secret archives, hidden from the faithful. One sentence remains from those who investigated: the priest did not vanish. He was rewritten. Children who are born within earshot of the chapel grow strangely. Some speak in Latin they never learned. Others wake screaming in the night, whispering that they dreamed of a man with hollow eyes and burning skin, calling them by name. The villagers bury those dreams quickly. They know better than to listen too closely, because listening was how it began. And if you linger in silence, real silence, the kind that weighs heavy like a shroud, you might hear it too. A whisper, soft as breath, patient as eternity. Not a prayer to heaven, not a curse from hell, just a name, your name. And when you do, you will remember the priest who came before you, the one who thought prayer was a shield, until he discovered it was a doorway. The one who begged for salvation and became the litany itself. Father Elias. They say his name will never die, because now, every prayer, whether holy or damned, carries it somewhere between the words. Every amen is a reminder, every silence a waiting echo. He is not gone. He is prayed. And if you listen long enough, if you let the quiet sink too deep, you will find your own name waiting beside his.